She was standing in the quiet of her small apartment, the crisp lines of her military uniform still sharp, the weight of her service evident in every crease. At 25, Sarah had poured her soul into her career, early mornings, long nights, relentless drills. Her family, though, saw it differently. To them, she was a disappointment, a soldier who had failed to live up to their expectations. Not the lawyer, not the doctor, not the one who stayed close to the family's idea of success. Just Sarah, the girl who chose a uniform over their dreams for her. Then the phone rang. It was an unexpected call from a courtroom she'd never imagined she'd be connected to so personally. Her sister Emily, always the rebel, always getting into trouble, was at the center of a legal battle. Sarah's heart raced. She had always been the responsible one, the protector. Now it was Emily who needed her. But what came next was something no one could have predicted. The voice on the line was firm but familiar. The judge presiding over Emily's case. An old family friend, someone Sarah had known since childhood. The judge's tone held a weight heavier than the courtroom itself. "I've been watching you, Sarah," the judge said. "Not just for today, but for years. You've carried yourself with honor and strength. You're exactly the kind of person the governor needs right now. What do you say to becoming his chief of staff?" The words hit her like a thunderclap. Chief of staff? For the governor. It wasn't just a job offer, it was a lifeline. A chance to prove, not just to her family, but to herself, that she was more than what they thought. More than the failed soldier they whispered about behind closed doors. She felt the weight of the uniform on her shoulders differently now, not as a symbol of sacrifice misunderstood, but as a badge of capability, discipline, and leadership. The judge's unexpected offer was more than a surprise. It was a validation. But the emotions tangled inside her. Pride battled with doubt. Relief wrestled with fear. Could she really step into a world so different from the military? Could she command the respect of politicians, advisors, and the public? And most painfully, could she finally rewrite the story her family told about her? Sarah thought about Emily, her sister, caught in the middle of this legal storm. How had their lives diverged so sharply? Emily's struggles were real, but this unexpected twist meant Sarah's path was about to change too. She remembered the countless family dinners where her achievements were overlooked, where her uniform was met with silence or subtle disappointment. "Why can't you be like Emily?" they had said. "Why waste your life like this?" The words stung, but now, in this moment, they felt hollow. The phone call had shattered more than just her evening. It shattered the narrative she'd been trapped in. Suddenly, she saw a new horizon. She said to herself, "This is my chance. Not just to prove them wrong, but to prove to myself that I'm exactly where I'm meant to be." Before we jump back into the story, tell me, where are you tuning in from? And if this story resonates with you, if you know what it's like to carry the weight of others' doubts, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special just for you. Something that will inspire you to face your own battles and redefine your own success. Now, let's go back to that moment when Sarah's life took an unexpected turn, the call that changed everything. A family's disappointment. She stood silently, adjusting the sharp crease of her military uniform, the fabric cool against her skin. At 25, Sarah had already faced more judgment from her family than most do in a lifetime. Their voices echoed in her mind, disappointment, disbelief, and a quiet condemnation that never quite left her alone. Why waste your potential in the military? You could have been a lawyer, a doctor, or something respectable. Her father's voice was steady but heavy with expectation. "We wanted better for you," her mother had said, eyes glistening with a mix of sorrow and frustration. "Joining the army isn't what we imagined when we dreamed of your future." Sarah remembered how those words had stung, how they had carved small cracks in her confidence. She'd tried to explain, to defend her choice, but it always felt like talking to a wall. Their hopes for her had been shaped by tradition, careers lined with stability, prestige, and safety. Her uniform, with its medals and ribbons, was invisible to them. They saw only the uniform, not the woman who had earned it. The last family gathering was the hardest. Around the dinner table, voices rose. not in celebration, but in critique. "You gave up on us," her sister had said sharply. "The army was just a phase," her uncle added, dismissive. "You're better than that." Sarah felt their words like a cold wind, pushing her further away from the family she loved. She had wanted to prove them wrong, to make them proud. Instead, she felt isolated, like a stranger in her own home. But that night, as the laughter faded and the house grew quiet, Sarah's thoughts shifted. She wasn't just a soldier. She was more than their judgments. The phone call came unexpectedly. Her sister's judge, a respected figure in the state, offered her a job. "You're the governor's chief of staff," he said plainly, handing her a new kind of challenge, a new kind of recognition. It was a role she never anticipated, but one that fit perfectly with her skills, her leadership, and her desire to serve in a different way. The invitation stirred something fierce inside her, a blend of pride and uncertainty. Could she accept this opportunity without betraying the woman she'd fought so hard to become? She thought back to the years in uniform, the discipline, the sacrifices, the moments when she doubted herself but kept moving forward. Those experiences had shaped her, had given her strength. Now she faced a new battle, the one between what her family saw and what she knew to be true. "They said I failed," she whispered to herself, "but maybe I just needed to find my own way." Her fingers traced the edge of the letter from the judge. It was more than an offer. It was a chance to rewrite the story her family had written for her. In the quiet of her room, Sarah made a decision. She would accept the role. Not to prove them wrong, but to prove herself right. The weight of their disappointment would always be there, but it would no longer define her. She was ready to step into the next chapter, with her head held high, her uniform hanging beside her, and her heart set on a future of her own making. She was the governor's chief of staff now, and this time she would be the one to say what success meant. Taking the leap. The day Sarah accepted the chief of staff position was the day she decided to take control of her story. Dressed still in her military uniform, the weight of family judgment hung heavy around her shoulders. They said she'd failed, that she was too rigid, too out of place in politics. But Sarah saw something different. She saw a chance to prove them wrong. The transition was anything but smooth. The office buzzed with whispers as she walked in. Some glanced skeptically, eyes narrowing behind coffee cups and behind computer screens. "Military background?" they murmured. "What does she know about political strategy or navigating these corridors of power?" Sarah felt the sting, not just from strangers, but from those who should have welcomed her. The doubt was palpable, yet beneath the doubt was an opportunity, a challenge she was ready to meet head-on. One afternoon, as a crisis unfolded, a sudden policy backlash threatening to unravel weeks of work, Sarah stepped forward. The room was tense, voices quick to point fingers, slow to offer solutions. Without hesitation, she called for a crisis management meeting. Her voice was steady, clear, commanding attention. "Let's focus," she said. "We need a plan, and we need it now." She laid out a strategy, drawing on her military training, assessing risks, prioritizing actions, assigning roles. Her colleagues watched as she orchestrated the chaos into order. The room shifted. Doubt gave way to respect. "Sarah," one senior aide admitted quietly later, "you handled that better than anyone expected." It wasn't just about the plan. It was how she led, calm under pressure, decisive, inclusive. The skills honed in uniform translated here, in the heart of political storm. In the quiet moments that followed, Sarah thought of her family's words, how they dismissed her, doubted her. But here, in this office, she was crafting a new narrative. A narrative where she was more than their opinions, more than their expectations. She was a leader, a strategist, a force to be reckoned with. Support began to emerge from unexpected places. A junior staffer who had once questioned her background approached her one morning. "I didn't get it before," the young woman said. "But watching you today, I see what you bring. We need that." Even the governor's closest advisors began to seek her counsel. The office, once a battleground of skepticism, started to feel like a team, her team. Sarah's confidence grew with each challenge overcome. She wasn't just surviving this role, she was shaping it, defining it, and in doing so, she was redefining herself. One evening, as she prepared for another long day, Sarah looked in the mirror, not just at the uniform she still wore, but at the woman who had taken every doubt, every harsh word, and forged them into strength. She whispered to herself, "I am the governor's chief of staff, not because my family said I failed, but because I chose to succeed." And with that, she stepped forward, ready to lead, ready to show the world exactly who she was, facing the criticism. The room was thick with tension the moment Sarah stepped in, still wearing her military uniform, the sharp lines and medals a stark contrast to the casual clothes around the dinner table. The air was heavy, not with celebration but with skepticism. Her family had heard the news. She was now the governor's chief of staff, but instead of pride, their faces showed doubt. Her father's voice cut through the silence first. "Chief of staff? Sarah, you're barely out of the service. How can they trust you with something so complicated? You don't have the kind of experience that office demands." Her mother chimed in, softer but no less critical. "It's not like you worked in politics before. You've been in the military. Good for you. But this is a whole different world. Are you sure you're ready for this?" Sarah felt the sting of their words, but she held her ground. "I'm ready," she said firmly. "My military service didn't just teach me how to follow orders. It taught me leadership, strategy, and how to make tough decisions under pressure." Her sister, sitting quietly at the corner of the table, looked away. There was a flicker of something. Uncertainty? Resentment? Ambivalence? Sarah couldn't tell. The silence from her sister was louder than any words spoken. Her father shook his head. "You think being in uniform means you know how to handle politics? This isn't a battlefield, Sarah. It's a maze of backroom deals and compromises. You could get lost." Sarah's jaw tightened. "Maybe that's what you think. But the skills I developed, discipline, organization, crisis management, they translate. They have to. The governor didn't hire me because of my age or because I looked good in a uniform. He hired me because I earned his trust." Her mother sighed, looking more worried than angry. "We just want you to be realistic. This job, it's a huge responsibility, and you're stepping into it without the usual background. It worries me." Sarah met her mother's gaze. "I know it's a risk, but if I don't take this chance, who will? I'm not here to live by anyone else's expectations anymore." Finally, her sister spoke, her voice low and hesitant. "I'm proud of you, Sarah. I really am. But sometimes it feels like you're trying to prove something, to everyone except yourself." The words hit harder than any criticism. Sarah looked at her sister, searching for the meaning behind them. "I'm not trying to prove myself to you or anyone else. I'm doing this because I believe I can make a difference, because I believe in what I'm capable of." Her sister's eyes softened, but the unease lingered. "I just don't want you to get hurt. The higher you climb, the harder the fall." Sarah nodded slowly. "I understand, but I'm not afraid of falling. I'm afraid of standing still." The conversation shifted, but the undercurrent remained. Their doubts were not just about her career. They were about who Sarah was and who she was becoming. The family's old narratives about failure and limitations clashed with the reality of her success. As the dinner wound down, Sarah felt a quiet determination settle inside her. This wasn't just a job. It was a statement. A challenge to the voices that had tried to define her for years. She stood, her voice steady. "I'm not the person you think I am. I'm not a failure. I'm the governor's chief of staff. And I'm going to prove that this family was wrong to doubt me." Her parents exchanged glances, the weight of their skepticism still present, but something had shifted. Her sister gave her a small, tentative nod, the closest thing to support she had offered all night. Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the gravity of what lay ahead. The criticism wasn't going to disappear, but neither was her resolve. She was ready to face whatever challenges came next, armed with everything she had learned in uniform and the strength to rewrite her own story. Because failure was never an option, not anymore. Unexpected allies. She stood there, the weight of her military jacket settling over her shoulders like a shield. The polished brass buttons caught the light, reflecting a discipline and resolve she was still learning to claim for herself. The office around her buzzed with voices and shuffling papers, a world that seemed both foreign and demanding. Yet, for the first time in months, she felt a flicker of something else. A longing. Her family had said she failed. They had said she was wasting her potential, letting her dreams slip away. They didn't see the long hours, the late nights filled with strategy sessions, or the quiet moments when she wrestled with doubt. They only saw a uniform hanging unused, a promise unfulfilled. But here, in this room, she was proving them wrong. Slowly, steadily, she was finding her footing. It wasn't easy. The political world was a maze of alliances and subtle power plays, a place where every word mattered and every decision rippled far beyond the room. She was young, new to this arena, and wearing a uniform that marked her past but not her present. She had to learn fast, not just how to speak the language, but how to listen, to understand the unspoken currents beneath the polished speeches. Then, one day, she met Marcus. He was a senior advisor, a man who carried the weight of experience in his calm demeanor and sharp eyes. When he extended his hand, it was more than a greeting. It was an offer of trust. "I've been where you are," he said. "Let me help you find your way." Their connection was immediate, but also deliberate. Marcus didn't just offer advice, he shared insight. He taught her to read between the lines, to anticipate challenges before they surfaced. He showed her how to build bridges where others saw only walls. With him, she wasn't just a newcomer trying to survive. She was a partner in shaping the future. Together, they took on a policy initiative that mattered deeply to her. It was about veterans' access to healthcare, a cause close to her heart and aligned with her values. She brought the perspective of someone who knew sacrifice firsthand, who understood the gaps in the system, not as an outsider, but from within. Marcus helped translate that passion into plans, into proposals, into actionable steps that could move through the bureaucracy. Late nights became their routine. The office lights burned long after the rest of the building had gone dark. Over stacks of documents and endless cups of coffee, they strategized. They debated fiercely but respectfully. They celebrated small victories and recalibrated after setbacks. In those hours, Sarah learned the intricacies of governance, the balance of idealism and pragmatism, the necessity of compromise, the art of persistence. And through it all, her confidence grew. The self-doubt that had shadowed her began to lift. She saw herself not as someone who had failed, but as someone who was rising, stronger, wiser, more certain. The skepticism she'd faced from her family, the quiet judgment she sometimes felt from others, started to lose its power. One evening, as they prepared for a crucial meeting, Marcus looked up from his notes and said, "You know, most people don't make it this far. You've got what it takes, Sarah. You're not just the governor's chief of staff in title. You are by every measure." Those words echoed inside her, a balm to old wounds and a spark for new ambition. She realized then that her identity wasn't tied to her family's expectations or past judgments. It was forged here, in the heart of this work, with allies who saw her worth and a purpose that ignited her spirit. As the days passed, their partnership deepened. Marcus became more than a mentor. He was a confidant. She shared her doubts without fear of judgment. He offered guidance without condescension. Together they navigated the labyrinth of office politics, turning obstacles into opportunities. This alliance taught her the power of camaraderie. In a world that sometimes felt isolating, she found strength in connection. It wasn't just about climbing the ladder. It was about lifting others as she rose. And in doing so, she discovered a profound truth. Success isn't a solitary victory. It's a shared journey. One afternoon, after a particularly tough negotiation, Marcus smiled and said, "Look at you, standing tall in that uniform, commanding respect in a room full of seasoned players. Your sister's judge might have had the final word, but you're writing your own story now." That struck a chord deep inside her. The judge had said, "You're the governor's chief of staff." Not merely as a title, but as a declaration of trust and capability. It wasn't just a role, it was a recognition of what she had fought to become. Her passion for public service, once buried beneath layers of doubt, now blazed brightly. She understood that leadership wasn't about perfection. It was about resilience, about showing up even when the path was unclear. It was about harnessing the lessons of the past and the strength of unexpected allies to chart a course forward. In those moments, she no longer felt the weight of failure. Instead, she carried the mantle of responsibility with pride. Because sometimes, the hardest battles are the ones fought within. And sometimes, the greatest victories come from the hands of those who believed in you when no one else did. Her family had said she failed. But here, in the heart of the governor's office, with Marcus by her side, she was proving something far more important. That failure is not the end, but a step on the road to becoming who you were meant to be. And she was just getting started. The turning point. The crisis hit like a storm out of nowhere. One moment, the governor's office was focused on policy, on progress. The next, a scandal exploded. An allegation of misuse of funds tied directly to a key project. Media frenzies spiraled. Headlines screamed suspicion. The public's trust wavered. And right in the eye of the storm stood Sarah, only 25, still in her military uniform, her insignia gleaming with the weight of her responsibility. Her family had doubted her. They had said she failed. Too young, too inexperienced, too fragile for this world. But now, Sarah had no choice but to prove them wrong. Not just to them, but to everyone watching. As the governor's chief of staff, she was the linchpin holding the office together. The governor himself turned to her, eyes filled with expectation. The press was demanding answers. The team was looking to her for direction. And Sarah? She drew a steadying breath. Military training kicked in. Calm under pressure wasn't just a phrase. It was her foundation. First, she gathered her team. Each member was tense, some near panic, but Sarah's voice cut through the noise. "We face this head-on," she said. "No spin, no evasion. Facts first, transparency always. We will control the narrative, or it will control us." Her team nodded, the tension easing slightly. They trusted her. She was their anchor. Within hours, Sarah devised a communication strategy that was clear and unflinching. She prioritized honesty but framed it with accountability and action. The message was simple. The governor's office recognized the issue, was launching a full investigation, and committed to cooperation with authorities. No excuses. No evasions. She prepared the governor for the press conference, drilling him on key points, anticipating tough questions. But it was Sarah who would ultimately take the stage. Standing before the sea of microphones and flashing cameras, Sarah's military poise was undeniable. Her uniform was a symbol, not just of discipline, but of service. She began with a voice steady and strong. "Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Thompson, Chief of Staff to Governor Reynolds. Today, our office faces a serious challenge. Allegations have been made regarding the handling of public funds allocated to one of our major projects. These allegations are deeply concerning, and we do not take them lightly." She paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. "Our commitment is to transparency, to truth, and to the people we serve. We have initiated an independent investigation to uncover the facts, and we will hold accountable anyone found responsible for wrongdoing." Her words were concise but powerful. She didn't shy away from the gravity of the situation. Instead, she embraced it. "I understand the disappointment this news may cause, but I ask for your patience as we work through the process. Our priority remains the welfare of our community and restoring trust in our leadership." Questions came fast and furious. Sarah fielded them with precision, refusing to be rattled. "Is the governor involved in the misuse of funds?" "No evidence has implicated the governor at this time. Our investigation will be thorough and impartial." "Will there be consequences for those responsible?" "Absolutely. Accountability is non-negotiable." Her calm confidence shifted the energy in the room. The media began to see her not as a spokesperson deflecting blame, but as a leader owning the moment. Back at the office, the team watched the live feed, their respect for Sarah deepening. This was the turning point. When the press conference ended, the narrative began to change. Headlines started highlighting Sarah's leadership rather than the scandal alone. Editorials praised her clarity and courage. Social media buzzed with support. But most importantly, Sarah's family, who had once whispered doubt behind closed doors, began to see her in a new light. Her sister's judge, a figure they all respected, even remarked during a private conversation, "You're not just the governor's chief of staff. You are the backbone of this office." For Sarah, those words meant more than any accolade. They symbolized a shift, not only in how others saw her, but how she saw herself. The young woman who had been written off as a failure had just led her office through a storm with the precision and calm of a seasoned commander. Her military training had been the foundation, but her resolve and integrity had forged her legacy. From that day forward, Sarah's role was no longer questioned. She earned her place at the table, her voice carrying weight in every decision. Her family's doubts began to fade, replaced by pride and newfound respect. This crisis was not the end of her journey. It was the moment she truly began to lead. And, as the governor's chief of staff, Sarah was ready for whatever came next. Reconnecting with family. The night air was brisk, as Sarah adjusted the sharp collar of her military uniform. Tonight, she wasn't just the governor's chief of staff. She was a daughter reaching out, hoping to cross a chasm years in the making. Her parents were coming to the governor's mansion, an invitation she had extended weeks ago, carefully crafted to create a space for understanding. For years, her family had told her she failed, that choosing this path, one so different from their expectations, meant she'd never measure up. But tonight, the weight of their judgment felt a little lighter. Tonight was different. As she greeted her parents at the grand doors, there was a flicker of hesitation in their eyes. They saw the uniform, the poised confidence, the respect she commanded from those around her. But beneath that, they saw the daughter they thought had lost her way. Sarah took a breath and led them inside. The room buzzed with political chatter, laughter, and the clinking of glasses. Yet for Sarah, the noise was a distant hum. Her focus was on her parents, watching them watch her. They saw her in her element, engaging with elected officials, strategizing quietly in corners, commanding attention without demanding it. This was the version of Sarah they had never really understood. Her mother's eyes softened as she observed the way Sarah moved through the crowd. Her father's usually stern expression faltered, replaced by a quiet pride he struggled to express aloud. And then, there was her sister who had once been her harshest critic. Later, away from the crowd, Sarah found her sister standing by a window, the city lights flickering behind her. The moment was fragile, but charged with unspoken words. "You're not who I thought you were," her sister said quietly, voice barely above a whisper. "I guess I never really saw all this, the way people listen when you speak, the way you carry yourself." Sarah smiled, a mixture of relief and sadness washing over her. "I know I didn't fit the mold you wanted. I know I failed your expectations. But this is my life. I'm proud of it, even if it's not the story you wanted to tell." Her sister's eyes shimmered with tears she refused to shed. "I was so harsh. I thought I was protecting you, but maybe I was just scared you'd change or that I'd lose you." "You didn't lose me," Sarah replied softly. "I've always been here. Maybe just in a different uniform than you imagined." The vulnerability between them cracked open a new space, one where forgiveness and understanding could begin to grow. For the first time in years, they talked not as adversaries, but as sisters seeking connection. Later that night, as the event wound down, Sarah watched her parents depart with a newfound warmth in their eyes. Their judgment hadn't vanished, but it had softened. They saw her not just as the girl who left their expectations behind, but as a woman who had carved out a path defined by strength, intelligence, and resilience. Her family's voices, once echoing with doubt and disappointment, now hummed quietly with cautious respect. The journey to this moment had been long and painful, but standing in that room, surrounded by the people who mattered most, Sarah felt a shift. She was more than their judgments, more than the failures they believed she carried. She was the governor's chief of staff, a military officer, a sister, a daughter, a woman redefining her identity on her own terms. And tonight, she was finally starting to belong. Sarah's invitation wasn't just about impressing her family. It was about opening a door, about showing them the reality behind the uniform and the title, that success isn't always loud or flashy. It's steady, purposeful, and sometimes quietly revolutionary. When her parents arrived, the tension was palpable. Years of unspoken disappointment hung in the air like a heavy fog. But as the evening progressed, something shifted. The formal setting of the governor's mansion, the dignified presence of the crowd, the respect Sarah commanded, it all spoke louder than words ever could. Her father, who rarely showed emotion, nodded approvingly when Sarah introduced him to a key policy advisor. Her mother, who'd always worried about her future, asked thoughtful questions about the initiatives Sarah was leading. And her sister, who had labeled her a failure, listened intently to Sarah's explanation of the crisis she had managed just weeks before. That crisis, the one no one thought Sarah could handle, became the turning point. It was the proof her family needed to see. Not just that she succeeded, but how she succeeded. With grace, intelligence, and unwavering dedication. The sister's eyes betrayed the surprise she felt when Sarah recounted the judge's words, a judge who had looked her in the eye and said, "You're the governor's chief of staff." Those words, simple and powerful, carried weight far beyond the courtroom. "I never imagined you'd get this far," her sister admitted softly. "I guess I was wrong to judge you so harshly." Sarah shook her head gently. "We all have our own paths. I'm not here to be the person you expected. I'm here to be the woman I am." Their conversation stretched into the night, a dance of vulnerability and healing. They spoke about missed birthdays, angry phone calls, and silent dinners. But more importantly, they spoke about hope. Hope that family could be more than a measure of success or failure. "I want us to be closer," Sarah said quietly. "Not because of my job or my uniform, but because we're family, and I want to belong." Her sister reached out, taking Sarah's hand in hers. "Me too." In that moment, the barriers built over years began to crumble. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation. There was still work to do, but it was a beginning. A promise that the past wouldn't define their future. Sarah's journey was never about proving them wrong. It was about proving to herself that she could rise above their expectations, that she could wear her uniform with pride and carry her title with honor without losing the connection she craved. Tonight, as she stood among friends and family, Sarah realized she had found a new kind of victory. Not the one measured in titles or accolades, but one measured in belonging. And that was worth more than all the judgments in the world. The story of Sarah is a testament to the power of perseverance and the courage to rewrite your own narrative. When her family said she failed, they saw only a narrow version of success, one tied to their hopes and their fears. But Sarah's success wasn't just in her role as the governor's chief of staff. It was in her ability to handle crisis, to lead with integrity, and to bridge the gap between personal dreams and family expectations. When the judge in her sister's courtroom said, "You're the governor's chief of staff," it wasn't just a statement of fact. It was a declaration that Sarah's worth was undeniable, that her achievements could no longer be dismissed. And through that recognition, Sarah found the strength to reach out, to invite her family into her world, and to begin the healing process. The evening at the governor's mansion was more than a social event. It was a turning point. Sarah's parents saw their daughter not as a failure, but as a leader. Her sister saw her not as a rival, but as a kindred spirit. And Sarah saw herself, not through the lens of their judgments, but through the lens of her own truth. This is the moment when family stopped being a source of pain and became a source of belonging. And it all began with one simple invitation, and the courage to accept that success means something different to everyone. In the end, Sarah's story reminds us that family may sometimes say you've failed, but true success is about staying true to yourself. It's about wearing your uniform, whatever it may be, with pride and owning your place at the table. It's about breaking down walls, opening hearts, and finding your way home. Because no matter the doubts or the distance, family is always waiting for you to come back. And tonight, Sarah came home. The final challenge. The moment Sarah stepped into the spotlight, the weight of her family's doubts pressed heavily on her shoulders. They called her a failure. They said her dreams were too big, that her military uniform was no armor for the political battles ahead. But Sarah knew something they didn't. Her journey was just beginning. Her reputation had been growing steadily. Years of service, discipline, and leadership had earned her respect in many circles. Yet, as she aimed for a higher position, the stakes rose sharply. Her most formidable opponent appeared, a political figure skilled in rhetoric and strategy, determined to undermine everything Sarah stood for. The attack wasn't subtle. Military experience does not equal political know-how, her opponent declared at a press conference. We need someone who understands politics, not someone who treats governance like a battlefield. The words echoed in the media, casting shadows of doubt. People questioned whether Sarah's uniform was a symbol of strength or a sign she was out of her depth. The very thing that had defined her military background, was now framed as a liability. But Sarah refused to retreat. She called her closest supporters together. "They think my uniform is a weakness," she said, voice steady with resolve. "But it's my strength. My experience taught me discipline, integrity, and how to lead under pressure. That's exactly what this job needs." Her campaign shifted gears. No longer just about policies, it became a mission to reclaim her narrative. She shared stories of her service, leading troops through adversity, making tough decisions in uncertain times, and always putting others first. Each story was a testament to her character and her capability. She highlighted her accomplishments: legislation she had helped shape that improved veterans' health care, community programs she had spearheaded that reduced homelessness, and initiatives that boosted education and job opportunities. These weren't just bullet points on a resume, they were lives changed because she refused to give up. Sarah traveled tirelessly. Town hall meetings, interviews, debates. She faced every challenge with unshakable determination. The more she spoke, the clearer it became. Her military background wasn't a hindrance. It was her foundation. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for, the public debate. It was more than just a contest of ideas. It was the defining moment of Sarah's campaign. The auditorium was packed, the nation watching. Her opponent began with the familiar jabs. "Leadership in the field doesn't always translate to leadership in the office," he said, trying to cast doubt. Sarah waited, calm and composed. When her turn came, she stood tall, her uniform a symbol of every sacrifice and every victory. "I respect my opponent's experience," she began. "But leadership, true leadership, is about service. It's about listening, adapting, and standing firm in your values. My time in the military taught me that every decision affects lives. That responsibility doesn't disappear when you leave the battlefield." She spoke of her vision, a future where policies were crafted with empathy and strength, where communities thrived because their leaders understood their struggles firsthand. She challenged the notion that political experience alone was enough. "Experience matters," she said, "but so do courage, integrity, and a willingness to fight for what's right." The audience responded. Applause rippled through the room. For many, Sarah was no longer just the officer in uniform. She was a leader who embodied the very qualities they wanted in their government. Behind the scenes, her family watched quietly. The same voices that once doubted her now whispered in awe. Her sister's judge, a figure once skeptical, had been among those moved by Sarah's unwavering dedication and clear vision. And then came the call that changed everything. "You're the governor's chief of staff," the judge said, voice firm but approving. Those words were more than a title. They were a verdict of faith and acknowledgement. Sarah's journey was never just about proving others wrong. It was about proving to herself that failure is only final when you stop trying. Her uniform wasn't a barrier. It was a beacon. The values she carried, discipline, honor, resilience, were exactly what her state needed. As she accepted the role, Sarah knew the real work was just beginning. There would be new battles, new challenges, but now she had something stronger than any uniform. She had the trust of her community and the conviction of her own heart. And no matter what came next, Sarah was ready. Victory and new beginnings. The moment the verdict was read, silence filled the courtroom. The judge's words echoed in Sarah's ears. "You're the governor's chief of staff." Those words were more than a title. They were a declaration, a recognition of everything she had fought for. Sarah stood tall, her military uniform crisp, the weight of the past years settling around her shoulders. She had faced doubts, disappointment, and harsh judgments, not just from the world, but from the people she loved most. Her family had told her she failed. But here, in this moment, the judge had said otherwise. It wasn't just about winning a position. It was about proving that setbacks don't define us. Sarah remembered the nights she spent questioning herself, the arguments with her parents who couldn't see past her struggles, the moments when her sister's judge had been her only voice of support. She had been told that her dreams were too big, that she was chasing something impossible. But she was here now, victorious and ready. The victory was more than professional. It was deeply personal. She had fought to redefine her worth, not just in the eyes of her family, but in her own heart. The role of chief of staff was daunting, the responsibilities immense. But Sarah knew she was ready. Every challenge she had faced had prepared her for this. As she left the courthouse, the city seemed different, brighter, full of promise. She thought back to the long journey, the military discipline that had shaped her, the late nights studying policy, the endless meetings and debates. Each step had built the woman standing here today. That evening, Sarah sat down at the family dinner table. The air was thick with unspoken words, but tonight felt different. Her parents looked at her with something new, a mixture of pride and understanding. The same parents who had once doubted her achievements now saw the strength behind her success. Her mother's voice broke the silence first. "Sarah, we've been hard on you. But seeing you today, hearing the judge's words, we're proud. Truly proud." Her father nodded, adding, "You've shown us what it means to fight for your dreams. Even when the world says no, you didn't fail. You just had to find your own way." For the first time in years, the barriers between them fell away. Sarah felt a warmth she hadn't known in a long time, a sense of family unity that wasn't just about shared blood, but about shared respect and love. Her sister, who had stood silently by her side throughout the ordeal, reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You earned this, Sarah. You earned all of it." Sarah smiled, a quiet strength shining in her eyes. She realized that success was never just about titles or accolades. It was about the journey, the growth, the lessons, the relationships that endured. It was about the people who stood with you, even when the world turned away. Looking around the table, Sarah understood something vital. Nurturing personal connections was as important as any professional milestone. Her family's pride wasn't just a reward. It was a new beginning. That night, as the conversation flowed and laughter filled the room, Sarah felt a renewed sense of purpose. She was ready to take on whatever came next, to serve not just as chief of staff, but as a leader who could inspire change and bring people together. Her future was unwritten, filled with challenges and opportunities, but Sarah knew she wasn't alone. She carried with her the strength of her military training, the wisdom born from struggle, and the love of a family who had finally come to believe in her. With a deep breath, she looked out the window toward the city skyline. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new victories, and new chances to make a difference. And Sarah was ready. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.